Hi, this is your instructor, Teresa Pelkie. Welcome to our class. Alright, what is jQuery Mobile? It is a touch-optimized mobile framework. It supports smartphones, tablets, and desktops. So actually you could use it to build desktop applications, or you could also use it in conjunction with what are called media queries to scale it for the different devices. Bullet point number 3, it is built upon the jQuery framework, also HTML5 and CSS. It encompasses a variety of widgets that are very, very easy to configure, and it also provides themes for customization. So the jQuery mobile framework is very similar to the jQuery UI, whereas we already have these existing widgets and the functionality already built into them, and they are very easy for us to implement and configure. And the same theme builder that we use to customize the jQuery UI components is used to customize the jQuery mobile widgets or components also. All right, so there are a lot of resources. Basically, the resources developed by the jQuery development group, jQueryMobile.com, and also the theme roller for jQuery Mobile is at jQueryMobile.com/theme-roller. All right, the basics behind how jQuery works are bullet point number 1, data attributes. This concept of data attributes is part of the HTML5 specification. So if you look at bullet point number 3, in the specification, what was decided was that we can create our own custom attributes that begin with the word data and a hyphen. So initially, HTML attributes were relatively set in the HTML language. Now in HTML5, we have the ability to create our own custom attributes. And what that is, and what jQuery is doing is actually it uses the data attributes, the specific data attributes that they lay down, and it includes that in their framework and in their code. And based on those data attributes, it will actually implement those widgets or components and actually style them. So there's very little need to write any JavaScript code at all. Although you can, but you can actually develop a very nice little mobile website without really even understanding what you're doing by just reading the directions and copying and pasting the code. All right, so in this blue square here, here we have an example of a data role attribute. All right, so data role equals page. Well, that means something to jQuery. What that means is everything inside that opening and closing div tag is essentially a web page. Now, do we have to use a div? No. You can use a section. You can use probably a paragraph. You can use an article. But remember, when we use HTML markup to identify the structure of the document, you're pretty much going to be using either a div or a section, because what we're doing is we're dividing the content up into different sections or units. All right, so in the first div, data role equals page. That means something to jQuery. The next data attribute, data-theme equals B. All right, that's telling jQuery to apply a certain theme to that page. All right, it knows what these themes are. They're actually letters A through E. But when it sees data theme, that is a cue to jQuery to apply a custom CSS style. All right, the second div, data role equals header. All right, so what that means is that all the content in that div is going to be configured as a header component on the web page. And here again, we'll have a different theme for that. So a lot of the actual functionality and the style of these components is based on what data role values you assign to your div containers. All right, some of the other data role attributes besides page and header, we have footer, content. All right, so content is the main content. Footer, obviously, the footer. Navbar, button, a list view, collapsible. We'll be looking more at list view and collapsible next week. All right, so these are different data role attributes that provide some kind of a component in the jQuery mobile language that we can use in the web page. All right, so let's take a look at how we would get started. Notice we have an HTML5 markup language document here. There's our doc type, there's our HTML head, there's our meta. Okay, our second meta, name equals viewport. I'm going to talk about that again. All right, this is a very special meta tag. Essentially what that is doing is it's telling the browser to scale everything down to its normal scale, number one. Number two, to have the width of the web page the same as the width of the device. All right, then we have the title, then we have the link element. And notice the code in there, we're connecting a jQuery mobile style sheet. So the jQuery mobile framework comes with a style sheet. That's where these different themes are. Also, if there's any kind of plus or minus icons, other types of icons, it's all part of the style sheet, and jQuery essentially is implementing these images as background images. All right, the next line of code, the script. All right, now here's the jQuery script. This is the framework. And notice I'm not using the latest version. All right, sometimes that is a problem, so I'm using a specific version here. All right, you need to link to the framework, and then the last script tag, we're linking to the CDN for the mobile framework. All right, so you always will need 3 references, and you're either going to use the content delivery network or you're going to download the framework files yourself. But you need the style sheet, and that always goes first. You need the jQuery framework, and that always goes second. You need the mobile framework, and that always goes third. Anything after that, for example, if you do want to do any JavaScript code, that will come next. All right, this is an example of how we can create a single page document. All right, so let's take a look at the HTML. All right, here we have a body, and inside the body we have an enclosing div, all right, with the data role equals page. So that means that all the content inside that opening and closing div is going to be the content for the one page. The second div, data role equals header, and then we have an H1 page title. If you look at the right, notice how jQuery displays it. That is the default style for a header. All right, note it, you can change it. The next is we have the data role equals content. That's the next div in the middle of the page on the left. All right, that's where all the content will go. And if you look to the right-hand side in the image, it would go interface there. The last one, data role equals footer. Notice we have an H4 element in there. And if you look to the right-hand side, that's how it would be displayed. Notice we didn't even use any JavaScript. We didn't even use any CSS. All we're doing is referencing these data role attributes in a particular order, and jQuery renders them as components of the page. And at minimum, you should have a title, some content, and a footer. All right. This is the theory behind how we do multiple page documents. In a normal HTML web page, the A element, ahref equals, we generally have separate HTML files for separate pages. In jQuery Mobile, we don't, not to say that you can't do that, you most certainly can create different HTML files and link them together, and sometimes you probably will. But here again, depending on the nature of the content, jQuery gives us the ability to do what is called creating a multi-page document. And the reason for this is that even though mobile devices are extremely powerful and very effective, they do not have the computing power that the desktop does. And every time we need to make a request to the server, that takes up a little bit of bandwidth. So we want to minimize trips to the server as much as we can on a mobile device. And one of the ways that we can do this is by creating what is called a multi-page document. So we actually have different pages, several pages, in the same HTML file. And jQuery will display them as different pages based on how the code is written. So in this example, I have 2 pages. So if you look at the top of the screen here on the left, here's data role equals page ID equals 1. So jQuery uses the ID attribute. So if you have data role equals page, that means that's a page. Now if I have ID, that's how it would reference that page based on the value of the ID attribute. Now note further down in the middle of that same page there, where we have data role equals content, inside we have an HTML link, ahref equals. Rather than retrieving another HTML file, we're referencing a hash point. All right, and the hypertext is go to page 2. So that hash point references an ID. And what it's going to do, it's actually going to link to the ID further down underneath it. So the second block of code on the left here, where we have data role equals page, ID equals 2, it will actually display that because that's the ID it's referencing. Now, in that second page with ID equals 2, we have some other attributes. We have data add back button equals true. All right, this awesome little attribute, and these are HTML attributes. They are allowed in HTML5. They're custom attributes. As long as they begin with data and a hyphen, we can make up the second part. And in jQuery, they're fixed. You have to use them, and they mean something in the jQuery mobile language. All right, so data add back button equals true. It will automatically put a back button. And if you look to the screenshot on the right, look at that pretty little back button. And of course, we can give it a different theme. And that will automatically go back 1 page in history. All right. Now we can also create our own little link. So if you notice further down in the content on the left-hand side of the page, I have an ahref, which is taking us also back to the first page. So rather than linking to different HTML files, we can essentially link to sections on the page that are identified using the ID attribute based on the data role attribute being set to page. So this is a very common and popular technique in jQuery Mobile, these multi-page documents. All right, we also can use lists. And we'll be covering lists more next week. But this is just a preview. And here again, on a mobile device, because of their size, it is very difficult to click on a traditional link. So what jQuery does for us, it automatically makes buttons for us. And if you look at the code on the left, here we have data role equals page. It's just 1 page here, and we have a header. And further down in the middle, if you look at the data role equals content, we have an opening and closing UL element. And inside we have our individual LI elements, and inside there we have our ahref. Now this is a typical navigation list. This is how we have been coding navigation for 15 years almost. Well, maybe 10 or 13 years. So this should be very familiar to us. jQuery automatically will style it, providing we give the data role equals list view in the UL element. It will automatically provide this vertical navigation list, the whole area being clickable. So it's actually turning these LI elements into nice fat buttons that have a lot of padding and extend the whole width of the screen. Not only that, it's giving us a very nice little button, a little icon at the right if you look at the screenshot, little arrow there telling the user that obviously we're going to click and we'll go to more content. Another thing that jQuery does, if you notice in the screenshot on the right, we have dots after some of the text. So if the text does not fit, rather than dropping it down to another line, which does not look very professional, it will put the ellipsis there by accident. Now you can do this, you can do these ellipsis techniques in CSS. But anyway, we're not covering that in this class. Now, if I were to flip my phone in the landscape view, it would have enough room to show the rest of the text. All right, and here again, this is just another example of how we can customize our list with dividers and different colors, all done by using the different data role attributes that jQuery gives us. So this is a very, very powerful framework that allows us to really create very nice looking content with just pretty much pure HTML layout. All right, so let's go over some of the concepts that are being covered in this chapter. All right, now this chapter is focusing on using jQuery mobile to create a unique mobile website. So it is assuming that your regular desktop layout is for the desktop and you're creating something separate from mobile. And that's fine. You know, that is one way that developers choose to use. Some developers like to have one size fits all, meaning they'll create one site and they'll use different techniques, essentially media queries, and they'll change the layout for different widths, browser widths. All right. So in the book, they're talking about this is going to be a separate mobile site. There's a different one for the desktop, and therefore we're going to redirect the users to the mobile version. All right. So so in order to do this, to have a separate set of files for the mobile version, all right, we need to, when the user lands on our website, so www.xyz.com, this is my desktop version, we need a way of detecting that they're not a mobile device, and then we need a way of directing them to our mobile files, because our mobile files are going to be somewhere else. All right, I mean, they'll be on the same server, but they'll be in a different folder. All right, two ways of doing it. There is a nice custom JavaScript script out there, or a jQuery script that automatically does that, which I'm leading into, or you can do some kind of server-sided detection. All right, detectmobilebrowsers.com gives you some very, very nice downloadable scripts. And if you want to do it on the server, it has server-sided scripts for you. If you want to do it on the browser, it has the scripts written in JavaScript and written in jQuery. So this is already created for you. You don't have to figure it out on your own. It's amazing how much nice technology already exists at our disposal for us to pretty much use. Although you do need to customize it a little bit. All right, so here I have a screenshot of the two different of where you would need to customize it. There's going to be a place where you will change the default directmobilebrowser.com/mobile URL to the URL of your website. And a lot of users m.xyz.com or mobile.xyz.com. So the next time you're on a website, you type in a website in your smartphone, and then all of a sudden it flips you to the mobile version. Take a look at the URL. It usually begins with an M. If it's a separate site, if not, it's just, you know, a media query, one-size-fits-all layout that they're doing, which a lot of our modern content, you know, all the themes, the newer themes, and even the older themes of content management systems such as WordPress automatically do that. You don't even have to worry about it. There's already a mobile site sitting there. It's already done for you. The CDN, the software such as WordPress already does that. All right, so moving on. Here again, you can do this. You can also create media queries that will allow you to customize, provide a custom website for different devices. All right, so here's an all right. Another factor in this equation, so to speak, that we need to learn about is what is called the viewport. If you've ever accessed a web page in a smartphone and it looks pretty small, that's because the developer of that site does not have a mobile version of it, and it is not customized for a smartphone, and it looks very, very small. And that's because the actual resolution in the smartphone is very, very high. And I have some slides on that coming up. Although the width is only 320 pixels across, all right, still what it's doing is it's showing 900. It's showing, even though the width of the phone is 320, the resolution could be something as high as 930, which means that everything is going to look real small. So this is where this meta tag comes in at, that sets the width of the actual viewport we're looking into to be the same as the device width. So here is what you need to set. All right, so the basic settings for a mobile website, all right, meta name equals viewport, content equals width equals device width, comma, initial scale equals 1. All right, you really don't need to set it for a full page, but you could. All right, but this is something you have to have in your HTML, or it's going to be too small. It's just not going to look right. All right, these are some other properties for the viewport meta tag that you can set. If you don't want the user, for example, the last one, user scalable, if you don't want the user to scale, zoom in and out, you can set that also. All right, so here's an example from a website of how nice and big everything looks. All right. Okay, there's some guidelines. I'm not going to go over them. They're in the book, and they're also on the supplemental handout. All right, some more guidelines. Okay, this is jQueryMobile.com. There's the home page, or at least at the printing of this book. They sometimes change their interface. Okay, so here again, you need the jQuery core library, the jQuery mobile library, and you need the jQuery mobile CSS style sheet. And you would use either a content delivery network, or you would download them and include them on your server. All right, so, and here again, here is the code for including the files from the content delivery network. The style sheet goes first. The jQuery framework goes next. The jQuery mobile framework goes after that. All right, so here again is a little bit of a layout of a web page using jQuery mobile with a header, a content section, and a footer. And here we see the code. Most importantly, the data role equals page identifies everything inside that opening and closing div as the page. And here again, notice in the first slide I was showing you we were all divs. Now we're into structural elements, so it doesn't have to be a div. It can be a header. Data role equals header. Section, data role equals content. Footer, data role equals footer. So it's a good idea, when possible, to use your HTML5 structural elements instead of just generic divs. Generic divs are fine to use when there is no other tag that has any kind of meaning. All right, so this is the Vecta Corporation example that is being used in the book. All right, and so here's a couple pages. There's one page on the left, and when you click on the home page, you click the solutions page, you go over to the solutions page. So and I have all the code for this chapter on the public box folder, so that you can go over it and learn how this is accomplished. And the book does a very good job of explaining it. All right. Okay, so here we have the code for those two web pages. First div, data role equals page, ID equals home. And notice there's, in the second div, data role equals navbar, and there's our UL. So there's our navigation. So if I go back, there's the page on the left. All right, very simple layout. Data role equals header. We'll lay out the vector core that we see on the top. Screenshot on the left. The navigations are styled. Then we have the content, and then we have the footer. Okay, so here again, in the second div, data role equals navbar. And then we have the content and the footer. And that's the rest of it. All right. We also can open up what is called a dialog, and if you look to the left, excuse me, if you look to the screenshot on the right, rather than launching a normal page, it's called a dialog. Very similar to one of those lightbox effects that you see with the jQuery widgets, where you have to actually click the X to close it. These are also referred to as modal windows, meaning you have to click something to close it. This is another type of component that you can that jQuery provides for you. All right. Now, when we go from page to page, jQuery Mobile automatically provides these fading transitions. You also have your choice of using different transitions. And if you look at the middle of the screen, in our A element, here we have a data transition attribute, another data attribute that's fade. So if we wanted to use that, although that is the default, but here again, you can change that. The next line of code underneath, this is the data rel equals dialog, which is how you tell jQuery to open that page as a modal window. And here we're going to have a different transition. So all of what you see on the web page, a lot of what you see on the web page is being produced, is being laid out there by using these different data attributes and the different values that you are setting for them. There's also a lot of nice button effects that are very easy to implement using jQuery Mobile. You can tell jQuery Mobile, you can determine what icons. These are the default icons that are provided by jQuery Mobile that you can use on your button. So if we go back here, notice on these buttons, notice the delete button has an X, the home button has a little home, there's back to the previous, there's the add button. These are all icons that can be added to these buttons. Now remember, this is all done using CSS. These are implemented as background images, and when you link to the jQuery CSS file, all right, you're also linking to a collection of images. If you were to download it, those images would also be downloaded. And we just reference the image that we want in the code, and these are the icons that are provided. There's approximately 12 of them or more. All right, so an example of how we code for these buttons. In here again, there's different aspects to the buttons. Okay, so looking at the first sample of code, in our ahref, data role equals button. Here's another example of the data role attribute. Setting it to data inline equals true. It's a single standalone button. The second group of code, data role equals button again. And here's what we're setting: the data icon equals delete, and the text that would be on the button is delete. The text is actually inside the opening and closing A tag. And it doesn't even look like a traditional HTML-A element, because the data role attribute is essentially turning it into a block level element. It's giving it a border, it's giving it rounded corners, it's giving it the icon. All that is being done by jQuery. jQuery is providing an enormous amount of style, all right, which is actually producing these components. And remember, everything that we do on the web page is done with what? CSS. So there's an awful lot of CSS control here using jQuery, and how it knows how to style these things is by the values of the different data role attributes. All right, so if you wanted to have separate buttons, they would just be separate ahref. If you wanted to have them as a group, you can put them inside a div. This is the third block of code here. If you put them inside an opening and closing div with the data role attribute set to control group, and you can make them horizontal or vertical, it essentially is grouping them together, and notice they are all data role equals button. All right, so the back button, the last group of code here, in our A element, data role equals button, data rel equals back. And that data rel is very magical. It means that when you click on that button, it's going to go back to the last place you were. All right, so here again, there's a tremendous amount of functionality built in to these data attributes that jQuery uses. So you really don't have to learn a whole lot of complicated JavaScript. You just have to learn how these attributes work and what the different values are. Okay, here's the footer. This is the code for the buttons in the footer, the add to Facebook, add to Twitter. Inside the opening and closing footer element, the data role is footer, and they have a class UI bar grouping them together. And here again, if you look inside the A attribute, there's the data role equals button, making them buttons, but it's grouping them together so that they're side by side. That's what class equals UI bar essentially is doing. All right, so if we had 3 of them, they would all be together there in this bar, you know, a little bit of a navigation type bar, rather, but it's called UI here. And here we're adding the data icons. Data icon equals plus on our different buttons. So all of the style and all of the layout is done with our data attributes and some classes every now and then. All right. Okay, so here we're doing the same thing in our vector core example here. We have a navigation bar where we're configuring our buttons and we're configuring the icons on it. And if we take one more look at it, there it is. And if we look at the code used to create this, here it's in the header section. It's all in the header section. All right, so let's go back again. All right, so in the header section we have our H1, and we're putting the navigation in the header section. All right, so here again, you know, you could have put the navigation somewhere else, but that's the way they're doing it. It's very logical. All right, so let's take a look. There's our header, data role equals header, the opening and closing header on this slide. There's our H1 vector core, and here again, jQuery Mobile is styling it the way it styles an H1 in the header. You know, you can have an H2. You can do your own styling also. If you omit the H1, then it won't. It will not style it that way, and you can style it your own. All right, but let's take a look at the div. The div with data role equals navbar. Okay, so this is here again. The value navbar means that it's going to create a navigation bar, meaning that we're going to have these buttons that are going across side by side. All right, so inside we have our traditional UL with our LI element connecting our A element. All right, here again, this is traditional HTML navigation. We've been doing this for years. Now the only difference is these are not being displayed as links. And they're not displayed as links in traditional HTML layout either. Because what do? We style them. I mean, we write an awful lot of CSS, style our navigations in a traditional desktop application. here we don't have to go through all that work because jQuery Mobile is going to do it for us. All right, so here data role equals navbar is controlling how these links look. It's making them in the buttons. We don't even have to say data role equals button. All we have to do is put our list inside the div with data role equals navbar. Now we do put the icons on them. Data icon equals home, data icon equals star, etc. Now the class, notice in the middle of the slide, class UI button active. Here again, that automatically makes it the active button. So going back to our example here, when you land on a page, notice home is lighter than the rest of them. Usually there's some cue to the user as to which page I'm on. Usually one of the buttons has a little bit different look and feel. So this is the jQuery class that's actually doing that. Right there, class equals UI button active in the middle of this slide here. All right. Just instructions which you can read in the book. More default styles. And here again, jQuery does use the traditional default styles that HTML uses also. All right, this is an example of some of the different themes, how the different themes might interface. Here again, the themes, it has, jQuery Mobile has specific colorations for page themes and some different colorations for some of the other component themes. So here we have two examples. If you look at the code, header data role equals header. So we have the H1 and the navigation inside the header. And if we have a data theme E for the whole header, we can also override that in the navigation and give them different data themes. All right, so we can customize the look and feel. So in the code, we have the data themes for what the screenshot on the right-hand side, and on the screenshot on the left-hand side, these are the default values. So if you don't indicate a data theme, you're going to get the default. So the defaults are pretty much A's and B's. If you want to indicate something else, you can override the default. All right, and here again, these are some descriptions, and it's always a good idea to play around with them. You get a better understanding of how they look when you start mixing and matching. So here again, we use the data theme attribute to apply the theme. Now, you can use create your own theme with theme roller, just like you can for the UI components. And this is theme roller. And there are some directions on the page on how to use this. All right, so this is an overview of Chapter 17, how to get started using jQuery Mobile. And as you can see, it's relatively simple to start using the different components and customizing them.